My older brother slapped me so hard the glass in my hand shattered on the floor. "You're a failure," he hissed in front of our parents. No one moved. Mom whispered my name. Dad looked away. I just smiled through the sting and said, "2 months, Ryan. Let's see who fails first." I'm Lucas Bennett, 33 years old. The so-called quiet one in the family. I live in Denver, in a modest apartment with thin walls and a view of the same gray skyline I've stared at for 10 years. I work in human resources for Westfield Construction, a company that builds skyscrapers but runs on fragile egos. My job is to manage people, prevent disasters, and make sure no one burns the place down from inside out. My older brother, Ryan, has always been the opposite of me. 5 years older, louder, smoother, and born with a confidence that never required proof. Growing up, he was the golden child varsity captain, straight A student, dad's mirror image. Meanwhile, I was the backup plan. He was charm, I was consistency. He knew how to sell a dream, I knew how to keep it funded. After college, Ryan bounced between startups, always chasing the next big thing. Real estate, tech, even a fitness app that never launched. Every time he failed, he came home, told a tear-stained version of his story, and our parents applauded him for taking risks. When I got a stable corporate job, they said, "That's nice, Lucas. But maybe you could be more ambitious like your brother." When Dad retired and Ryan's last company collapsed, I suggested he join Westfield. I thought it might stabilize him. I used my credibility to get him hired in sales, vouched for his resume, even helped him prep for interviews. He promised, "I won't let you down." 3 years later, he was a department head and the company's rising star. Ryan had the charisma, the handshake, the right buzzwords. He didn't build projects, he built illusions. His numbers looked perfect because he made sure the rest of us carried the load. And somehow, I was always the one covering his tracks, approving his late reports, softening his conflicts, explaining away his creative accounting. I didn't mind, at first. That's what families do, right? But somewhere along the line, helping turned into serving. He stopped asking, started assuming. The more he rose, the more I disappeared. Our parents didn't see it. They adored him. Sunday dinners were just Ryan's highlight reel, how he closed another contract, how his boss trusted him like a son. I'd sit there, eating in silence, knowing half his success was built on bending rules I was paid to enforce. Then came the night of the slap. It was supposed to be just another family dinner. Mom made roast beef, Dad poured wine, and Ryan arrived late as usual, phone glued to his hand. I'd mentioned earlier that the company had launched a quiet audit of our sales division, routine compliance, nothing personal. But when Ryan heard, his expression changed. "An audit?" he said. "You trying to dig into my numbers?" I laughed. "I'm not the auditor, Ryan. I just process reports." "Yeah, but you love seeing people trip. Makes you feel useful, doesn't it?" Mom told him to stop, but he didn't. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You think just because you've got some office job, you're finally better than me? You're nothing, Lucas. You always have been." I remember the clink of my glass against the plate as I set it down. "Careful," I said quietly. "You're drinking too much confidence again." And that's when his hand connected with my face. The slap echoed across the table. The shock was instant, the sound of skin on skin. Mom's gasp. The sharp sting spreading through my cheek. My wine glass toppled, red streaking across the white tablecloth. Dad didn't yell. He just exhaled through his nose, disappointed in me somehow. Mom whispered, "Ryan." But he didn't apologize. He stood there, chest heaving, eyes full of rage and pity at once. "You've always been jealous," he said. "You'll never have what I have." I wiped the blood from my lip and forced a smile. "You're right," I said. "I'll never have your kind of pride." Then I left. No one followed me out. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred through the tears I didn't let fall. The slap itself didn't break me. It clarified me. Every humiliation, every ignored boundary, every favor he'd demanded suddenly arranged itself into a perfect pattern. For the first time, I saw what my brother really was. A man so terrified of losing control that he'd rather destroy someone else's dignity than face his own failures. And maybe, for the first time, I saw what I was too. The only person left who could stop him. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink. I opened my laptop. I started going through the HR files, the performance reports, the expense accounts. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for yet, but I knew what I wanted to find. Because if Ryan wanted a war, I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for proof. He thought the slap would silence me, but it only opened the door to his downfall. The morning after the slap, I woke up with a mark still burning across my cheek. It wasn't visible anymore, but I could feel it, an invisible bruise pulsing beneath the skin. The office felt colder that day. Everyone smiled the same plastic smiles, the same chatter filled the air, but I couldn't stop hearing his words. "You'll never have what I have." For the first time, I realized he was right. I didn't have his arrogance. I didn't have his ability to lie. And that made me dangerous to him. That week, I threw myself into work. HR is a quiet power. Nobody notices you until you know something they don't. I started with Ryan's department, reviewing expense sheets, overtime logs, and sales bonuses. Most of it looked clean at first glance, but that's how deceit works. It hides in routine. Then I noticed a pattern. The same subcontractor name appeared repeatedly. Mason Group LLC, small commissions, irregular invoices, all signed off by Ryan Bennett. A quick cross-check showed no registered vendor by that name in our database. I dug deeper: emails, authorizations, anything linked to that ID. That's when I found the first crack. A transfer receipt from company funds to a private account under Mason Group. I clicked open the details. The account belonged to Ryan Bennett. My hands went cold. He wasn't just bending rules, he was funneling money. At first, I didn't know what to do. Expose him outright, and my family would shatter. Stay silent, and the company might eat the loss while he walked free again. For 2 days, I did nothing but stare at that document. I couldn't bring myself to believe that he'd go this far. But the universe has a way of confirming the truth you're too afraid to face. That Friday, I overheard a conversation outside the break room. 2 junior staffers from sales were whispering. "Did you see Ryan's new car?" one said. "The Tesla? Yeah, custom color. He said it's a company bonus." The other laughed. "I thought HR had frozen bonuses last quarter." "They did," the first replied. "Guess rules don't apply to Bennett's." They laughed, and I forced a smile as I passed them, coffee trembling in my hand. That night, I opened my email again. I started saving everything: receipts, emails, vendor logs, into a folder I named Mirror. Because that's what it was. A reflection of who he really was. The following week, I requested an internal compliance check for departmental transparency. No one questioned it. It was my job, after all. Within days, the finance division forwarded me additional data. More fake invoices. More hidden commissions. More proof. He had stolen over $400,000 in misappropriated bonuses. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash that had been happening for years, and only now I was seeing it. Each document I opened was another slap across my face, but this time, it didn't hurt. It hardened me. When I confronted him, I didn't yell. I simply walked into his glass office one evening after everyone had gone home. He was leaning back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. "Busy day?" I asked, stepping inside. He looked up, smirking. "Always is. Some of us carry real weight around here." I ignored the jab and set a printed copy of the bank transfer on his desk. He frowned. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said. He scanned it, his smirk faltering. "Where did you get this?" "I don't think that's the right question," I said softly. "The right question is, how many more are there?" For a moment, The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Then he laughed, shaking his head. You think you're a detective now? This is nothing, Lucas. Just incentives. Incentives? Everyone does it. Performance bonuses. The higher-ups know. They don't, I said. But they will. His face darkened. You wouldn't. I already did. That wasn't true, at least. Not yet. But watching him pale, I realized he believed me. He leaned forward, voice dropping. You'd destroy your own brother for what? Revenge? For accountability, I said. Something you've never learned. He stood suddenly, slamming his fist on the desk. You think you're a hero? You're nothing but a bitter clerk hiding behind spreadsheets. You wouldn't have a job if it weren't for me. I stepped closer, meeting his glare. And you wouldn't have one if I'd told the truth sooner. For a moment, I thought he might hit me again. His hand twitched. Then he just pointed at the door. Get out. I did, but not before dropping my resignation letter on his desk. It wasn't real. It was bait. The kind that lures arrogance out of hiding. The next day, my desk phone rang. It was HR compliance. My request for an official audit had been approved. They needed someone discreet and informed to assist the investigation. I volunteered immediately. Ryan must have sensed something because he started acting nice. Too nice. He brought me coffee, complimented my work ethic, even suggested we rebuild trust. He thought charm could fix everything. I played along, smiled, accepted the coffee, and forwarded another file to the auditors. At home, Mom called constantly. You and your brother need to make peace, she said. He feels terrible. I almost laughed. Did he tell you that before or after buying his new car? She sighed. He's under stress, Lucas. You both are. I'm fine, I said. He's the one who's stressed. And I was right. By the third week, whispers started circling the office. Compliance officers were asking questions. Accounting froze outgoing commissions. Ryan's department looked uneasy. He barged into my office one afternoon, red-faced. You think I don't know it's you? He hissed. Know what? The audit, the rumors. I built this department, and you're trying to tear it down. I leaned back in my chair. If a department collapses because of truth, maybe it wasn't built right. He slammed his fist against the door. You're jealous because no one cares about HR. I smiled. They will when you're gone. He stormed off, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. 2 days later, he made his biggest mistake yet. He tried to frame me. An anonymous complaint landed in my inbox, alleging I had falsified leave records for personal gain. It was sloppy, the dates didn't match, the tone was identical to his writing. I forwarded it to compliance without comment. They traced the IP. It came from his office computer. That was the last piece I needed. The slap had been personal. The fraud was professional. But this was war. That night, I compiled everything into a 42-page report: emails, bank transfers, timestamps, IP logs, and a transcript of his incentive speech from the audio I'd recorded during our confrontation. The final page was a summary, 6 words bolded at the top. Recommendation: immediate termination, Ryan Bennett. I printed 2 copies. One went into a sealed envelope addressed to the CEO. The other, I kept. Not as proof of vengeance, but as insurance against regret. As I turned off the light in my apartment, I looked out at the rain streaking across the glass, and thought about that night at the dinner table. The slap, the wine, the look on his face. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. He'd called me a failure. But tomorrow, I'd show him what success actually looks like. I didn't want drama. I wanted procedures slow, clean, and final. The first thing I did was secure the evidence. HR systems have logs for a reason. Compliance audits live and die on chain of custody. I exported copies of all the files I'd collected into a read-only archive and handed it to Jenna Morales, the head of internal audit. Jenna is the sort of person who never laughs and whose stapler is rumored to have its own personality. She looked at the packet I handed over, 42 pages, emails, bank receipts, vendor details, IP traces, and didn't blink. "This is thorough," she said. "We'll lock it in the vault and cede copies to legal and finance." Her voice was flat, but I could hear the engine shift. Once legal had a copy, the company had to act. Maria, no relation to the lawyer from before, though the coincidence would have made my father smirk, was my point person in legal. She called me that afternoon and we sat together in a conference room with glass walls. "If we move too fast, he'll cover tracks," she said. "If we move too slow, he'll bury things. We need a controlled escalation." We mapped out the timeline. Phase 1. Freeze outgoing transfers from the sales department and notify finance to place temporary holds on any unusual disbursements. Phase 2. Discreetly subpoena records tied to Mason Group LLC and cross-reference the bank account. Phase 3. Set an investigative interview with Ryan under the auspices of routine compliance review. Phase 4. Prepare an executive summary, and, if findings confirmed, call an all-hands meeting to announce outcomes and leadership changes. I told Maria about the fake complaint he'd tried to pin on me. She nodded. "Appreciation like a blade. That's a gift," she said. "It shows desperation. It also gives us an opportunity to corroborate IP addresses and link actions to sources." Hi. We also needed public-facing optics. The company valued reputation more than most things, and an ugly insider scandal would attract attention. Maria drafted a short memo template for the eventuality. We'd be transparent about corrective action while emphasizing that the company had internal controls and was holding people accountable. While legal and audit did their work, I focused on soft power people who actually knew the day-to-day truth. I pulled aside a few senior analysts and managers I trusted. Mark in finance, who hated surprises. Priya from contracts, who could read a clause until it cried. And Jenna's deputy, Sam, who had a memory like a ledger. I told them what I'd found, quietly and without flourish. "Don't confront him," Mark said. "Let the process do the talking." "Agreed," Priya added. "If we give him room to scramble, he'll move funds, ghost vendors, make it messy." Len. That's when I realized the most dangerous thing about Ryan wasn't his audacity, it was how quickly he could make people doubt reality. So we tightened the net. We scheduled the investigative interview for a Tuesday morning, framed as a routine project reconciliation. I proposed to Jenna that I take part in the interview as HR liaison. Neutral, procedural, with the authority to ask follow-ups. Jenna agreed. If legal had the right to be present, the room would be recorded and the transcripts would be admissible. 2 nights before the interview, I printed a copy of the forensic report. The analyst's conclusions were clear. Signatures inconsistent, tracing artifacts present. IP addresses matched Ryan's workstation for the anonymous complaint, and Mason Group's registered phone number forwarded to a VoIP account linked to one of his shell emails. The pieces snapped together with a loud, ugly clarity. I rehearsed my role. Don't bait, don't gloat. Speak in terms of policy, not emotion. Emotional language is easy to discredit. Procedural language is not. If I could let the paperwork speak, the truth would read as indisputable. The morning of the interview, I walked into the conference room like any other HR rep doing his job. Ryan's jaw was tight, as if he'd rehearsed indignation into a ready expression. He'd brought 2 aides and a stack of glossy proposals backup material for charisma. Jenna sat at the head of the table with the recorder on. Maria sat opposite, pen poised. "Good morning," Jenna said. "We're here today to reconcile project accounts and answer a few compliance questions." She started with innocuous items. CLAs, labor hours, invoice dates. Ryan answered like a pro, weaponizing charm to deflect. Then Jenna slid the first printed transfer across the table without a word. The room tilted. The recorder clicked. "Can you explain this?" Jenna asked. Ryan's smile faltered for half a breath, long enough for a crack. "That's a vendor payout. Standard commission," he said. "Recorded to an account registered to your name," Maria added, gentle but precise. "Why would a vendor payout be made to your personal account?" He stammered. He tried to point to a contract. Priya produced a scanned contract with no such clause. That was the moment the jig began to unspool. He shifted from arrogance to anger to pleading in minutes, a man running out of rehearsed lines. I watched him closely. There was a flinch when I mentioned the forged complaint. "You framed me," he hissed at me, even as in the room the auditors spoke of patterns, and the finance team proved reconciliations that didn't reconcile. He tried to pull colleagues into his orbit. One by one they looked down at their hands as the truth sat on the table like a stone. After 2 hours of documents, timestamps, and the kind of cross-examination you don't expect at work, Jenna turned off the recorder. "We're pausing here. Legal will prepare recommendations," she said. That pause was a small, dangerous thing. Administrative, neutral, but it meant the gears were engaged. It meant the CEO would be briefed. It meant the company had enough to act. In the following days, as legal prepared the executive summary and finance calculated exact losses, I built the presentation. I didn't design it to humiliate. I designed it to close a circle. Slides were simple: timeline, evidence, dollars, recommendations. The last slide read, in plain type, immediate termination, cause, misappropriation and falsification. I practiced the words I would say in front of the mirror, measured, resolute, not a hint of the boy who'd driven home with blood on his lip. I printed extra copies of the report and gave them to the CEO and board counsel with a note. For the all-hands meeting, confirm presence of security and lockdown on outgoing communications. We scheduled the all-hands for a Monday morning 2 months to the day since he'd slapped me. It felt ceremonial and utterly necessary. There was no joy in that, only the satisfaction of procedure catching up to fraud. On the evening before the meeting, I received a text from my mother, just one word: "Please." I read it twice and felt a hollow ache. Family would complicate this no matter what I did. But the ache did not alter my decision. Accountability, I'd decided, was the only way to stop the next person from being struck down in silence. That night I slept poorly, but when dawn came I was calm. The counterplan had done its work. Evidence secured, allies briefed, legal in motion, optics controlled. I left my apartment with a tie I'd never worn to impress anyone. Gray, unassuming. The work, I told myself, would speak for me. As I stepped into the elevator with my briefcase, I thought of the glass that had shattered the night of the slap. Glass breaks. Sometimes it's repairable, sometimes not. What mattered now was the structure beneath it. I was going to rebuild it the only way I knew how, by following the rules, not by breaking them. And for the first time since Dad had praised Ryan in the living room, I felt less like the failure everyone expected and more like the person who would make sure the company and the family could no longer hide behind charm. Monday morning, 2 months to the day since Ryan's slap, the air in the office felt different, dense, charged, like the calm before a thunderstorm. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Attendance was mandatory. Every head of department would be there, every assistant, every intern. And so would he. When I stepped out of the elevator onto the top floor, my reflection flashed in the glass walls of the conference room, tie straight, hands steady, eyes sharper than they'd ever been. I wasn't the little brother anymore. I was the man holding the match. The CEO, Martin Harlow, greeted me with a nod. "Morning, Lucas. We're all set." His voice was even, but his eyes were steel. The board sat behind him, calm and expressionless. On the center table sat a single folder. The investigation summary, thick, damning, final. At 8:55, Ryan walked in, all swagger and polish. New suit, perfect smile. He scanned the room and froze when he saw me sitting near the CEO. He tried to hide the flicker of confusion, but I caught it. He recovered with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Big crowd today, huh?" "Big day," I said. He laughed. "Don't tell me this is about those stupid invoices again." The CEO's expression didn't change. "Let's begin." The conference room doors closed with a soft click. The chatter died. "Thank you all for coming," Martin said, standing. "This meeting concerns an internal audit that has now been concluded." He gestured for me to take the floor. I rose, slow, deliberate. The projector hummed to life behind me, casting blue light across the room. On the screen appeared the first slide. Financial misappropriation, sales division. A low ripple of whispers spread through the audience. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This ought to be good." I clicked the remote. "Over the past 3 months," I began, "the company's internal audit uncovered irregularities in commission payments linked to unverified vendors." Another click. "These payments total $412,000. Gasps. Pens stopped moving. Chairs creaked. I didn't look at him yet. "Not yet. The responsible party," I continued, "used falsified vendor IDs and redirected funds to personal accounts under aliases. Forensics confirmed device signatures and IP logs linking the transfers to one workstation." Click. Slide 3. A screenshot of a bank transfer receipt. The account name was highlighted in red. Ryan Bennett. The room fell silent. Someone whispered, "No way." Ryan shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "That's fake. Anyone could have." Martin raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Bennett." His tone was ice. Ryan hesitated, then sat, jaw tight. I turned to the final slide. "In addition," I said evenly, "the same workstation was used to file a false HR complaint against another employee. Me. That too was traced and verified." I finally looked at him. Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, he looked like the boy I used to play baseball with, furious, cornered, terrified. Then the mask cracked into disbelief. "You did this," he said, voice trembling. "You set me up." I didn't blink. "No, Ryan. You set yourself up. I just made sure everyone saw it." He stood again, slamming his palms against the table. "You can't." "Enough," Martin said firmly. "The audit's findings are final. Effective immediately, Ryan Bennett's employment with Westfield Construction is terminated for gross misconduct and fraud." Gasps again. Murmurs. A few heads turned away, others stared openly. Ryan laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was that broken kind that collapses under its own weight. "You think this fixes anything?" he spat. "You'll always be the failure, Lucas. You think firing me makes you a man?" I picked up the folder, walked around the table, and placed it gently in front of him. "No," I said softly. "It makes me your replacement." He froze. "What?" Martin nodded. "The board has voted to appoint Lucas Bennett as interim head of sales. Effective today." Ryan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, he looked small. The room seemed to swallow him whole. Security waited quietly by the door, their presence calm, not aggressive. Martin gestured. "Please escort Mr. Bennett from the premises." Ryan stared at me, eyes wild. "You did this to me." I met his gaze. "No, Ryan, you did this to yourself." He knocked over his chair as the guards guided him out. The door closed. Silence filled the vacuum he left behind. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Martin began to clap. It wasn't applause, it was punctuation. One by one, others joined. A soft rhythm of acknowledgement, not celebration. Resolution. I stood still, the sound washing over me. The slap from 2 months ago replayed in my head, the sting, the humiliation, the sound of glass shattering. But this time I felt nothing, only air. After the meeting, people avoided eye contact. Some offered awkward congratulations. Others just nodded, unsure what to say. I didn't blame them. It's not every day you see blood and business mixed so cleanly. By noon, IT had revoked Ryan's credentials. His office was sealed, his email disabled. The Tesla he'd flaunted in the parking lot was repossessed within hours. The company had leased it under his name with falsified reimbursement claims. I spent the afternoon in meetings, signing transition forms, delegating teams, reassigning projects. The work was mechanical, steady, grounding. When I looked up from my computer, the sun was setting behind the glass tower opposite ours. The city glowed amber, indifferent and infinite. At 7 p.m., I finally walked out. The lobby was empty, quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Ryan was waiting outside. He leaned against his car, a different one this time, an old Honda with a cracked headlight. He looked deflated, not angry, just hollow. "You won," he said. "No," I said. "I just stopped losing." He nodded, eyes flicking to the ground. "They froze my accounts. Said I have to repay everything." "You do," he laughed bitterly. "Guess karma has your handwriting." I didn't respond. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You're better at this world than I ever was. I thought charm could fix everything. Guess I was wrong." "It usually is," I said. He nodded again, then straightened up. "Tell Mom I'm fine. She'll call you," I said. He smiled faintly. "She won't. She still thinks I'm her golden boy." For a moment, he looked like he might apologize. Instead, he just whispered, "I really did love this company, you know." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it sad." He turned away, opened his car door, and paused. "You were right about one thing, little brother." "What's that?" "You don't have what I have." He smiled faintly. "You have something better." Then he got in, started the engine, and drove off into the fading light. When I got home that night, I poured a glass of water, not wine, and sat by the window. The city outside buzzed faintly, alive and uncaring. My reflection stared back from the glass, calm, tired, but free. 2 months ago, my brother's slap had echoed through our parents' house like a declaration of dominance. Now, his downfall echoed through an entire building. Justice, I realized, doesn't need fire or fury. Sometimes, it walks in wearing a suit, carrying a folder, and leaves behind silence where chaos used to be. I raised my glass toward the skyline. "To endings," I whispered. "And to earning every one of them." The light from the city glimmered back, like applause only I could hear. The days after the firing were eerily quiet. No angry phone calls, no threats, no pleas, just a silence that felt too heavy to be peace. The office adjusted quickly, as offices always do. By the second week, Ryan's name was gone from the directory. His old office had been repainted, his chair replaced, his existence absorbed by the company's endless hum of productivity. But outside that building, the ripple hit hard. Mom called first. Her voice trembled between disbelief and accusation. "Lucas, what did you do?" I closed my eyes. "I did my job, Mom." "Your job?" she snapped. "He's your brother. He says you humiliated him, fired him in front of everyone." I kept my voice calm. "He humiliated himself. I just stopped covering for him." On the other end, I heard her sigh, tired, defeated. "Your father would have handled this differently. Dad would have wanted integrity," I said. "Not cover-ups." "No." She didn't answer. She just hung up. For a while, I thought that was the end of us. But truth has a slow burn. 2 weeks later, she called again. This time, her tone was soft. "He told me everything," she said quietly. "About the money, the forged signatures, the car. And I finally understand why you did it." Her voice broke. "I just wish it didn't have to be this way." I didn't have an answer. Justice never comes without loss. Ryan stayed invisible for a while, which suited everyone. Word around town said he'd taken contract work sales for a small supply company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. He'd sold the Tesla, downsized his apartment, and was repaying the company in installments per the court agreement. One afternoon, a letter arrived at my office. My name typed neatly, no return address. Inside, a single line written in Ryan's messy handwriting. I finally get it now. Failure wasn't what I was afraid of. Responsibility was. I stared at it for a long time before slipping it into my drawer. I didn't reply. Some messages are meant to sit in silence. A month later, Mom invited me to dinner. I almost didn't go. But something in her voice, gentler than it had been in years, made me say yes. The table looked the same as the night everything broke. Roast beef, wine, soft light. But the silence was different now, calmer. Halfway through dinner, she said, "He called me this morning." I set my fork down. "Ryan?" She nodded. "He asked how you were. He said, he's proud of you." I blinked. "He said that?" She smiled sadly. "He's trying, Lucas, in his own way." For the first time in years, my mother and I finished a meal without walking on eggshells. When I left, she hugged me, a long, fragile hug that said everything words couldn't. By early spring, I visited the Tacoma office again, the same building where I'd fired my brother. A new manager sat in his old chair, younger, hungry, and probably doomed to repeat some of the same mistakes. I walked the halls, greeted people, and left without saying who I was. The company had already moved on, and so had I. In my car, I scrolled through old photos, family holidays, graduations, two brothers smiling with arms around each other. The kind of smiles you never notice fading until they're gone. I thought about calling him. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "You're learning, Ryan. That's enough." Because that's the thing about justice. It doesn't always need a spotlight. Sometimes it lives quietly in people finally growing up. When I got home that evening, the sky was painted gold over Denver. I stood by my window, watching the light fade, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle into something lighter. For the first time, I realized the slap hadn't broken me, it had freed me. And in its echo, I'd found something better than revenge: peace. A year later, the story that once consumed me had become just another chapter I could finally close. People at work no longer whispered about the Bennett brothers. The scandal had faded into memory, replaced by new faces, new mistakes, and the next round of corporate gossip. But some echoes lingered. Ryan still sent checks, small, regular, handwritten. The memo line always said, "Repayment." It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about proof that he was finally taking responsibility. Sometimes he added a note, "Got a promotion," or "Mom's garden looks good this year." Nothing sentimental, nothing deep, but it was enough. Mom and I spoke every Sunday now. The bitterness had melted into something like forgiveness. Once, she said, "You know, your father would have been proud of both of you. One for learning how to lead, the other for learning how to change." That stuck with me, because somewhere along the line, I realized she was right. Justice hadn't been about destroying my brother, it had been about giving him the one thing no one ever did before: the chance to face himself. And maybe that's what growing up really means, understanding that strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to humiliate or punish, it just needs to stand tall, steady, and unafraid of silence. I still remember that night in my parents' dining room, the sting of his hand, the look of disgust in his eyes, the taste of blood on my lip. For a long time, I thought that moment defined me. That slap had humiliated me so deeply it carved a scar I thought I'd never outgrow. But standing here now, looking out my window at the city lights, I finally understand. That was the night I stopped trying to earn other people's approval. The night I learned that dignity isn't something anyone gives you, it's something you protect. My brother called me a failure. Maybe once I was. But failure taught me boundaries, and boundaries taught me peace. And peace, that quiet, steady kind, turns out to be the best revenge of all. He slapped me once, I fired him once, but what I truly did was free us both.